Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ann Arbor Inclusive. I'm Zach Damon. We have a wonderful show for you today as Hilary Cohen and Sandy Ryder, co-artistic directors of the Wild Swan Theater. So the theater has been around for over 35 years. So I'm interested to know what circumstances led both of you to originate the Wild Swan and get involved.
There were four of us at the beginning, and we were interested in making a theater that would be a professional theater for young people and also a theater that was accessible. But we didn't have any money, and I don't think we really had that big an idea of what we meant by all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we just were excited to work together. We had the same goals, and we just started. Our first play that we did wasn't actually officially Wild Swan.
Okay.
But soon after that, we decided to start a theater company, and it took us a while to name it, but we finally came up with Wild Swan.
Sure.
And that was where we started, and that was 1980 that we first worked together.
Wow.
And I think we always had, we actually had the same mission then that we have now, and that was to make this kind of theater that would be the best theater possible, but for a wide audience, an audience that to make theater that would be available to everybody.
Well, and I mean, it's amazing, Hilary, because you just mentioned something. You said both of you there was like no finances to start this theater in the beginning.
Yeah, we really didn't have
in 1980.
any money.
So talk about that. I mean, that must have been just getting up every morning and trying to figure out how this was going to originate. So can you talk a little bit about, I mean, was it tough? Were there times where you said, gee, I don't know if we can do this, maybe we should do something else?
Well, you know, I don't think we ever questioned that we didn't have any money, because when you have no money, you only can go up. And I think we were we had been doing Wild Swan about 10 years. And for the first time, there was a little money, not much, like $600 at the end of the year. And we decided to use that money and buy a marimba, actually. So we didn't even then, we were going to each get $300, but we changed our minds and bought this marimba.
I mean, we made some money, but that was always just to cover our costs.
Right.
But we had we both did other jobs. Like it wasn't that we only did Wild Swan.
Sure.
I taught at the university. Sandy ran a bakery. Many people will remember Sandy from the bakery days. Say Cheese was Sandy's bakery.
Oh, wonderful.
It was a cheesecake bakery that I started in in 79, 80, about the same time as Wild Swan.
So Sandy was very famous for the bakery. Many people still remember Say Cheese.
Oh my
But
goodness.
so we both did that, and then we did this theater, and the two people who started with us went on to do other things. And Sandy and I found a way of working together that we loved, and we're not exactly the same kind of people. And I think that one of the things that is special about Wild Swan that we didn't know was that we would work so well together. And I'm always grateful for that we wound up being such a great team, and that we share a kind of artistic way of working that we both really love and appreciate. And it's hard to make a nonprofit last for a long time. Nonprofits are not easy. As you say, how did we keep it going with the money? But it's hard to keep it going in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
It's not an easy part of the economic world in the United States. And so I'm grateful that 35 plus years later, we still love getting up and working together every day. And I think we've created a space to work for other people. They like working together too.
I think we're really lucky. Hilary and I have been really lucky. Lucky to have met each other, and lucky to be in this world of bringing stories to life, and loving kids, loving theater, and finding our way to make that theater come alive. That we have sort of a style and a vision that we want to do that we just share without ever really having talked about it. It just is, we both feel the same way. We know when we find an exciting idea and when we make it happen.
So you have a professor, and then you have a a baker, essentially. So how did that relationship come about? I mean, did you walk in one day and was eating some cheesecake and said, hey, you know, I think we should start this theater?
That's a good way. It's just as good
Food
as any.
has definitely been a real thing.
Of
that
course,
we
right,
connect
right.
on.
Many of conversations have come
Yeah.
up.
Not quite that. I was doing this project. I was teaching at the residential college. I had a couple of students. We were doing a project at the adolescent psychiatric hospital. We liked what we were creating. A play grew out of that. One of the students said she would like to do a play for her senior thesis at the RC. She knew Sandy. She said, let's bring Sandy into it. So it was actually that. But it was because we had started at the adolescent psychiatric hospital on this creative project that the idea of being inclusive, that's how that came into the work to begin with.
Sure.
And it was something that from the time I was even in high school, and I was always doing theater, I was already trying to figure out how to make inclusive theater. And so it became an underpinning, though, from that time, that whatever we did, we would make it inclusive, and we would try to understand what it meant to make inclusive theater. We didn't know what it would take to make a theater that everybody could come to.
Yeah.
We knew that it was important, but we didn't know how to do that. And then we set about educating ourselves, and then being open and creative and flexible about how to make a theater style that incorporated what we were learning.
What a great story.
Yeah, our first time we did a show, like early 80s, we, like Hilary was saying, we really cared a lot that everything we did was accessible to everyone. So we set about learning American Sign Language. Well, we actually, at the time, we didn't really realize it. This was in the early 80s. We took a class on sign language thinking we would sign and speak and do this entire show.
Yeah.
And that process led us to realize that's almost impossible.
Yeah, that's not so easy.
Yeah, so then we started working with people who were really good at not just American Sign Language, but in how to make it theatrical. So that's always been our style, is always incorporating American Sign Language. And then early on, we started making our theater inclusive to people with visual impairments. And even at the beginning, I remember our early 80s, we did a play called Owl's Winter. And we made these puppets that were very textural, so that if you didn't have any sight, you would get a lot of information tactily about the puppets and their character.
Yeah.
So I think from the very beginning, you know, we were in that direction. And that's been a great journey for us. We just did a show yesterday, and a mom came all the way from Port Huron with her 2 grandchildren, who were identical twins, actually, and they were hearing. And she came all that way so they could enjoy this play together. They all enjoyed this play, and that's what it's about.
No, definitely.
Where families can be together.
No, I mean, Sandy, I think both of you bring up great points. I mean, you talk about inclusiveness and how important that is, and not just, you know, within the theater realm or within the arts, but as a whole, and that whole philosophy. And Hilary, you mentioned something interesting earlier. You said that you perform for different age ranges, and I wanted to know from both of you, because at least from my experience, when a lot of people hear the name Wild Swan, they tend to just only associate it with, you know, the children's theater. But do you perform for, you know, other age ranges?
We do, and it's true. Some people think Wild Swan, little guys, and we have a number of productions that are for preschool kids or for the lower elementary school grades. But we've just created I think, a terrific piece about Rosie the Riveter. And our production about Rosie the Riveter is for middle and high school students, and we had a huge audience of adults who came without kids who loved this production too.
Oh, really?
And it's a musical. It's based on the lives of the Rosies who worked at the Willow Run aircraft factory, and we interviewed a number of the Rosies. They're in their 90s now. We interviewed about a dozen of them. And the play was complicated and deep and tough. It's because it was a hard life for these women, and they did important work, but it became a play not just about women in the labor force, but it became a play about diversity, about race, about tolerance, you know, very important social themes.
Right.
And we always have talkbacks after our productions for older audience members. So there were very dynamic conversations in the audience afterwards. So,
Oh, yeah.
So, and we do a lot of plays about that. We've done plays about the Underground Railroad. We've done plays about Michigan history. We've done, well, the Underground Railroad is, of course. We've done
Shakespeare.
Yes.
Twelfth
Right.
Night was one of our, I mean, you know, like it's for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, you can be really 99. It's really 9 to 99 is what I think of Rosie the Riveter. And I think, like with Shakespeare doing Twelfth Night, we did shorten it a little bit. I mean, everything was Shakespeare, but we took out some of the subplots just to make it the length that school groups could come to. But then I saw the show at Stratford where it was a 3-hour production, and honestly, I liked ours better. I felt like the real essence of what we were doing, was, you know, what Shakespeare was writing was really clear. We did Little Women. You know, it's beautiful literature. It's beautiful stories.
Sure.
Beautiful role models. We tend to stay away from plays that are gender stereotype or just don't have good messages.
Yeah.
So we just bring, like Charlotte's Web, which is a show that will be coming up this season in early May.
Sure.
It's got to be one of the best stories ever.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned Charlotte's Web, because this is a good opportunity to talk about our touch tours.
Yes.
Let's
talk about that.
Yeah, touch tours are a method of giving young people, adults too, who are visually impaired, an opportunity to explore the stage space before a performance begins. And the point of that is that if you can't see the space, but you have a chance to explore it, you have a sense of where the play is taking place.
Sure.
So we invite our patrons who are visually impaired onto the stage, and they walk through the stage space, and they walk in and through and under and over any of the stuff that's on the set, and they feel the things that the set is made of. So in the case of Charlotte's Web, there are hay bales to walk over and to feel the size and shape of. There's Charlotte's Web, which is 8 feet off the ground.
Oh, wow.
And there's ladders to climb up. There's Templeton's trap door to go through. And by the time you've done all of these things, you have laid on your body a visceral, physical sense of what the layout of the stage space is. So when you take your seat and experience the play through your ears, you know what the arrangement of the physical space is. It really, really adds a great deal to your experience that if somebody's just describing it to you, you haven't got.
So can you do the touch tours, you know, even though you don't have a vision impairment?
We have to limit it mostly to people who are visually impaired, because it takes quite a bit of time. It takes time of the actor's preparation time. So, but if you are interested, you make an appointment. It doesn't cost anything. We want people to take advantage of it. You just need to call our office and make the appointment. It takes a half an hour for this, so it's really the actor's preparation time. They have to come early. And then sometimes we have as many as 10 or 12 people doing the touch tour.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. We had 12 little guys, and they were all over the set, and they were wildly climbing up to Charlotte's Web, and it was really, and sometimes we need a lot of one-on-one kind of assistance with that, but it's great fun. But also, like a family with somebody who's visually impaired, the siblings are welcome to come and the parents, so that can fill up the stage as well. And what else should I mention, or should we mention about the touch tours?
One thing, it's just a nice story that I love, that made me think of it when you were talking about touch tours, is sometimes we have adults who are visually impaired and their kids are seeing. But the experience, again, it's like the similar as the one with the again, another adult, but we were doing Alice in Wonderland, and the audio describer said that there are two people on the stage holding signs that say Tweedledee, Tweedledum, which whenever there's information that would be given, you know, by sight, that's what makes sure it's described. So the audio description included that. So,
Sure.
so his little kid said, "What's the sign say?" And he was able to say Tweedledee and Tweedledum. He said it's the first time he was able to answer that kind of question.
Oh, wow.
And it just felt so good.
Yeah.
And if we know also the age of the people coming for the audio description, we create a script
Okay.
that is spoken in the pauses of the dialogue. So that also takes a lot of preparation, to, you know, to get the exact verb or the exact adjective that's really going to convey the very most of what would be seen.
Oh, let's talk a little bit more about the audio description.
Sure.
That's the touch tours are one thing that we do for people who are visually impaired or blind. This audio description equipment works like this. What Sandy's talking about during the play, during pauses in the dialogue, a describer sits in the light booth with this little piece of equipment here, talks into this mic. The only people who hear this description are people who are equipped with a little pack like this with a receiver.
Okay.
They just have this, which is in one ear, like this. That's all they need.
Wow.
And it's, that's it. They hear the dialogue of the play just like everybody else does, through the other ear.
Wow.
And nobody else can hear the description. And the person who's in the light booth, just like the light booth here in the TV studio, nobody hears what's going on in the light booth. That's completely soundproof. And whenever there's a pause, as Sandy was saying, that's the moment for the describer to say, "Into the stage space creeps the bad fairy or the dragon," or, you know, like whatever the character is, but there might be something going on that the dialogue doesn't refer to.
Right.
Or in this case, like what Sandy was saying, Tweedledee and Tweedledum are carrying signs, but the signs aren't referred to in the dialogue. So the only way you would know about the signs is because you would see them with your sight. But if you are visually impaired, you wouldn't know that there are signs on the stage, except the describer would say, "Tweedledee and Tweedledum bound onto the stage, each carrying a sign. One says, go this way, one says, go that way," or, you know, like, you know, whatever it is.
Well, yeah, and this enables the person to follow along with the story and to be aware of what's going on.
Everything that's not referred to in the dialogue, but is important information, is conveyed through the description.
Sure.
And theater is, only one part of theater is dialogue. There's so much that's movement, that's dance, that's mime. That's, so it's really important. So that's another element of our outreach for people with disabilities, is the audio description. And that's another thing that we offer. It doesn't cost anything. We just ask people to call ahead and reserve it. We have 12 of these.
Wow.
So we can accommodate 12 people at a time.
That's a good amount of people.
Yeah.
And I mean, are you the only theater that does this? I mean, are there other theaters that do this?
We learned this from the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But to my knowledge, there aren't other theaters in Michigan that do audio describe their productions.
Now, is there a push to sort of make live theater more accessible, and do you both hope for that in the future?
Yes. I think we loaned, I'm trying to remember, but we loaned these to some theater that was going to use them, but I don't think they've kept it as a regular thing. But, you know, of course, like I remember this family coming to all of our shows with their daughter, who was about 9, and they said they never thought of theater as an activity for her. They would look at other ideas, and then when they realized theater was a totally, you know, wonderful activity they could all enjoy. And they started coming from Lansing for every show. I'm thinking about that. She's probably in high school now. But she grew up, theater was part of her life. And they never had theater be part of her life. The other thing we do a lot at Wild Swan, Hilary and I, is we bring theater experiences and activities and workshops to kids with disabilities. Because, you know, using your imagination and creating and expressing
Sure.
is something we all need to do.
Oh, of course.
It's so important. So that's another thing we love is, and we've worked with adults, little kids, you know, all sorts of people, and have had such great times.
Yeah.
Where they discover their own ability
Yeah.
to perform and be different characters. And
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Can you guys talk about those workshops? You have dramatic ability, and then you have one of the fun ones that I think is great is the play's the thing. And so can you?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a nice title, but this general idea about we call dramatically able, because that suggests that through drama, everybody is able.
Yeah.
Everybody can do theater. Sometimes you might not be able to walk, but if you're in a wheelchair, you can still participate with
Sure.
a lot of your body. You may not be able to speak, but if you are signing or if you're gesturing, or you may not be able to hear. But I mean, you know, like it's what you can do. What we're thinking about is not what you can't do, but what you can do.
Exactly.
But we've also learned that if you've got a disability, the way you conceive of the world or the way you conceptualize requires certain kinds of theater activities.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you would do drama with a group of kids who are deaf is different from the way you do drama with a group of kids who are blind.
Right.
And so Sandy and I've spent a huge amount of time learning about that, understanding that, and developing drama activities that are tailored for each group of kids or adults that we work with who have disabilities. And we've learned a lot. We've been doing that part of the work for maybe 30 years now. We
Sure.
started working with kids who are deaf 30 years. That was the first group of people with
the
disabilities
early 80s.
we worked with. And we always work with their teachers. We work with therapists. We work with health specialists of all kinds so that we aren't working in a vacuum. And we're very careful that we learn as much as we can from
Sure.
their all kinds of health specialists. And so we've learned a lot. And but as Sandy is saying, that it's huge the difference this makes in the lives of the participants
Right.
to have creative experiences, because kids with disabilities wind up experiencing a lot of isolation. And drama is a wonderful art form that moves away from isolation to inclusion, to collaboration.
Yeah.
Drama is something you do in a group.
Yeah.
You know, art therapy is great too, and so is music therapy, but you do those on your own.
Yeah.
But drama you do together.
Yeah.
right.
And that's one of the reasons that drama is so successful.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our work is about finding ways for our groups of participants to collaborate creatively in a group.
If you guys can briefly touch on too, I mean, the great thing about Wild Swan is that it's not open to only performers with disabilities, right?
Right. Wild Swan's goal is to make the best theater we can make and make that theater accessible to everyone. And whatever that means then happens. You know, we've had performers who have had some disabilities, but I would say the majority of our plays are done like, you know, that's the goal, is to tell that story the best way we could tell
Yeah,
it.
sure.
We just did a version of a play with a young woman who's deaf, and
Yeah, it was our first. We had a deaf and hearing actors. It was interesting.
and also interpreted in sign language and also voiced.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
it's complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
So all of those things to balance all of those.
Yeah.
And then also when we did a Christmas Carol, we've done a Christmas Carol a number of times,
Yeah.
but one of the times we did it, our Tiny Tim was deaf.
Oh, wow.
And that was, so not only, Tiny Tim has a physical disability,
Right.
but also in this instance, the actor, it was the little girl, the actress, was deaf.
Yeah.
So that was, something else that we did.
Well, no. I mean, I think it's great that you're able to incorporate everyone and use that to your advantage. So I also want to talk to me about just one of the most humorous memories that you have working with the theater company? Can you guys share
Well,
one with us?
you know, what came to my mind when you just mentioned that question was we were doing a show called The Firebird. It was a really, really horrible winter storm going on. And we had to drive, I think, to Mount Clemens, but pretty far.
Okay.
So we get there, and we realize we don't have one of the costumes.
Yeah.
And we realize this. The show has already started.
Oh, my goodness.
We are minutes, or probably less than minutes.
You're
but
kidding me.
From the entrance of that character.
Oh, my
And there
goodness.
is no costume. And this costume, this character is like a troll who lives underground, and
Sure.
he's just this crazy costume. So everyone, I remember one of the actors had a zippered fur like lining that went around her hood. She unzipped it. Then somebody took their coat and they turned it inside out. And we just instantly made a costume. And I was actually playing that character. So when I came on the stage, the person who was signing looked at me, and usually they look at me and they describe me and his eyes just got so big.
Yeah.
And Hilary was in the audience.
I was sitting in the audience. And the Firebird, it's the Russian folktale of the Firebird, and we did it in a medieval Russian style. So the costumes all were these heavy, furry, sort of medieval things. So this is, and then what they did was sort of take all this modern furry stuff.
Yeah.
And Sandy walks out on stage, and I'm sitting there with no notion that there was this problem. And it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And then this moment where the interpreter, Dan McDougall, looked at Sandy.
Yeah, his eyes got so big.
And then he did a double take.
Yeah.
And he looked again.
And you could see
and
him
then
just
he looked out at
keeping
the
it
audience.
together. Just
And
keeping it together.
it was hilarious. And then part of what he was doing in his interpreting was to say, this is Neural the Gnome, and then to sort of describe the costume, and to sort of, but he kept having to look because he couldn't believe what Sandy was wearing. And it was, and I mean, theater, it's one of its pleasures is it's live.
Yep.
It's not recorded. You can't, it's not safe. You can't edit out the mistakes. You just have to deal with them. And so as a director, what I love is watching the moments when the actors have to fix it.
Sure.
Yeah.
They did a great job
Speaking
of
fixing it, we were doing a show at Madonna.
Yeah. And
the stage was coming apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were on this platform. They'd put it together. They'd rig the platform.
Yeah, and we were dancing, and we were doing a barnyard dance.
It wasn't a conventional stage.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so it gets this big gap, and then one of the actors, who I think was Lurvy, you know, in Charlotte's Web, he said, "Excuse me, Mr. Zuckerman, while I put the stage together," and he jumped down and pushed these two platforms together.
Oh,
but
geez.
it was just one of those great moments.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today, folks. I want to thank Hilary and Sandy for joining me in studio, and we hope that you can tune into Ann Arbor Inclusive next month. Stay awesome, Ann Arbor.